Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here, and today we'll be exploring the magical world of the Knight's Greatsword. This weapon already had an easy time landing multiple hits, but with the recent speed buff to the heavy attacks in patch 1.14, you'll be dropping combos faster than a clumsy kid at snack time. Today's setup is a 139 strength build with a whole bunch of endurance. The extra endurance allows us to swap to Gugs if needed, however, if you think you'll just be sticking to the KGS, feel free to just pour the rest of those points in strength or faith or whatever you want. However, if you are two-handing the KGS, you only really need 54 strength since the hard cap is 80 and you get that after the 1.5 strength multiplier kicks in. The talismans are pretty much up to you. I'd recommend the two-handed sword talisman since that'll boost pretty much all of your attacks aside from your Ash of War. However, you can mix and match between the multi-hit talismans like the Godskin Swaddling Cloth, Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. I found that multi-hits were more consistent in duels than invasions just because you have a little bit more time to land those hits, so I opted for the Shard of Alexander and the two-handed sword talisman while running invasions, and then just swapped them around during the duel portion of the showcase. For Ashes of War, we can swap between Piercing Fang for burst damage and Flaming Strike as a nice get-off-me tool. In our offhand, we'll be rocking Dane's Footwork, which also received a buff in patch 1.14, and it's great for chase downs, it hits a little bit harder, and the heavy attacks are much better now. Now, I know some of y'all have a passion for fashion, so we'll be looking at two different apparel options today. Option 1 has all the overconfidence of a state university frat star, while having none of the drawbacks of only making it 2 years into a business major, but that doesn't mean that this fit doesn't mean major business. Option 2 lets folks know that you've got that dog in you. We don't really know how that dog got in you, and doctors think that you should probably try and get it out, but if you care what people thought, you never would have stolen Scruffy from your neighbor's backyard. That just about covers this build. We'll be exploring some poise and frame data at the end of this video, but for now we'll move on to the showcase. Thanks to all the folks who've joined my newly released YouTube membership program. If you're looking for early access to videos, some extra content, or you just want to support the channel, please consider joining as a member, or if you want a free alternative in terms of how to support the channel, you can just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and that would really help me out. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the showcase. Alright, so this first invasion is going to be a pretty interesting one. We have a group of 3 that pose a number of significant challenges. Now, you might not know that based on the person that's guarding with backhand blade and getting guard broken almost immediately, but basically we have someone with backhand blade, we have another player that's casting heal from afar, and then there is a third player in the mix that's going to be running Endure on fists. So unfortunately I missed both my guard breaks, just not expecting to actually be getting guard breaks in that moment. So because the KGS is so heavy on follow-up light attacks, I actually miss those riposts and don't get that damage, but I think there'll be kind of a happy ending for that character in terms of riposte damage, so we'll keep an eye out for that. But really what we're trying to do is get in some major burst damage before the heal from afar can take effect. And at this point I was laboring under the delusion that the host was the player that was casting heal from afar, and at a certain point the other character who is the actual host will be using a rune arc. So that kind of clued me in at a certain point in this invasion that I should actually really be focusing on the player with heal from afar. And really, like, that's just the best play in general. That's the most optimal way to deal with a group of 3. But let's just say for whatever reason you can't focus on the person running the heal from afar, then, like, you know, you'll have to deal with that. And so you'll see me dealing with that for a while. And at a certain point I realized, like, anytime I'm getting a couple hits in on one player that's not the one casting heal from afar, like, it's all just getting nullified by the extra HP from the incantation. So my best bet at this point, I think, is going to be a parry, and fortunately this player is running a parryable weapon. So what I've got is an offhand shield that I'm planning on parrying at some point, and I also swapped my talismans over to the dagger talisman just to try to make sure that I get that actual one-shot in that moment. So the player with Moog Spear is actually the host, and they will be switching over to, I believe, the iron balls with the Endure on them. So right now they're just trying to go for some attacks with Moog, and it's not a bad AoE, and I just kind of need to look out for that. But really the healing is the thing I'm most concerned about, and this player with the Great Katana is my main focus for now, and we'll just try to go ahead and set up a parry as best we can. Now, they pull out a parry shield, they're way late, and I imagine that they're going to just kind of attack directly out of that parry, so they do that, and we get the parry, we get the riposte, we get the one shot, and now it's a 2v1. So here, I'm still going to be trying to focus more on this player with Moog Spear, assuming that the faith-based player is the one that is the host, and here just I don't know. I feel like this is just a big argument for why heal from afar is overtuned. It doesn't require that many stats. You can use it a whole bunch, and the closeness of the player to the heal doesn't need to be that close. It's a pretty big AoE for that healing incantation. It just heals so much, especially if you have high faith. So, it just proves to be kind of problematic. And I know a healer playstyle is a thing for groups of players. It's just extremely frustrating in Invasion. So we need to kind of back off. We're throwing out some sleep pots with the hopes that maybe we can get that player slept who's using the healing incantations, just because it will lower their FP, and perhaps they don't have infinite FP, but that never seems to be the case in Invasions. It feels like everybody always has infinite FP. So here we do get in one heavy attack. We could have gone for the follow-up light attack, but again, we're kind of saving that player for last, and here we get a parry, and this was just absolutely heartbreaking in the moment where we get the parry and we don't manage to get the riposte because we're weapon swapping when we get hit by the Hammer of America. So that was really tough to get that parry and just kind of think we were going to one-shot this other player who we thought at the time was a Phantom. It was just absolutely brutal. But we do kind of back off, and this will be one of those rare instances where I do use a America's Blessing. So I think I have 3 on my character, and I get them all back every time I start a new build. So just because I revert my saves, which is pretty standard if you're making content for Invasions, because there's a limited number of larval tiers. But yeah, I don't usually use the America's Blessing, but in this case it just really felt like it was kind of necessary. And there's also some latency here as I whiff these backstabs. You can see that just the timing is fairly reasonable, at least in my eyes, and I think at least one, if not both of these players were from Japan, so there's I'm expecting some latency. I'm not surprised that we're seeing some latency here. I do go for a healing incantation just to get a little bit of HP back over time. Nothing by comparison, but it is something, and we'll just kind of take it. And yeah, it was difficult to kind of get in a good moment with the KGS, and that's why I think the KGS does such a good job in Duels versus Invasions. I think it's still really strong in Invasions, but just having the time to land your full combo before you either get stunned by another player or the HP gets recovered by the heal from another player is pretty tough. So this was a very rough moment. I was out of heals at this point, and just kind of the big AoEs were coming in, and I was like, I really don't want to lose this one. I feel like I need to come out on top. These players have given me so much grief. They've taken so much HP and just kind of returned it back to the other players. I need to finish them off. So finally we get that massive thorn in my side throughout the course of this invasion, and we're able to focus on the host, who promptly runs away for the rest of this invasion. So just kind of classic. But we go ahead and we swap over to a heavy thrusting sword. I highly recommend heavy thrusting swords. I feel like when the DLC dropped, I kind of neglected them. Wasn't sure if I would prefer backhand blades as a chase down tool or something, but the HTS is just, when people are running in a straight line, the different options you have for chase downs, the length, the forward momentum, it's all phenomenal. So that was a bit of a long one, and kind of the only one like that where it's just a very clear gank situation in an area with no PvE, and that's not typically the style of Invasions that I like to showcase, and also that I like to play in. Usually I like it when it's a bit more dynamic, but sometimes Invasions are like that, so I thought there might be something educational to pull from that. So this next one is going to be a group probably of gankers based on the weapon setup. One player is running both the Claws of Night and the Sword of Night, so we need to look out for both those Ashes of War. Another player has the I forget what it's called, these twin axes, maybe the Death Knight twin axes, but that Ash of War is particularly tricky in groups of people because your best bet is to either knock them out of it after kind of the blink bolt, so before they get iframes, or kind of after their iframes end from the Blink Bolt Ash of War part, and then if you can stun them in that moment, they can't do the follow-up, or you need to roll in. But rolling in can be very tricky if you have other players that are trying to attack you, because if you're trying to run away and you know the person with the twin axes is coming at you, you need to roll back towards your opponents who might also be swinging at you. So lots of potential for frame traps with that Ash of War, and feels very problematic. So we're going to be pulling out Flaming Strike just because of that lingering hitbox. That's going to be kind of a hope that we get that stun on the player after the Blink Bolt Ash of War. Perhaps the lingering hitbox will be there. That's kind of the train of thought that we have in that moment, and the reason we aren't using, you know, something like Piercing Fang. But here we get a nice backstab on the player with the Guts Ultra Greatsword, and they don't have enough HP to complete their Ash of War, so even though they do get massive hyper armor for that Ash of War, they don't get invulnerability to damage, and being dead is a good way to prevent that player from continuing their Ash of War. So now we need to look out for these two players that are quite enjoying their L2 button, but we are going to be able to hit them with Flaming Strike, and that's going to finish them off. So a little bit of L2 on our part, and then this player we saw earlier really liked to mash, so we're just going to mash back, and we're actually going to be able to just finish them off as well. Moving on, we're going to be in the Farum Azula area, and once again we have a group of 3. We do see a player that's using Black Flame Protection, which is going to improve their ability to negate physical damage. So we try to reduce that a bit by using a Freezing Pot. Once they're frostbitten, they will be taking more physical damage, so I don't know if it cancels out 1 for 1, but it is a helpful approach. Now, we do try to get off some shots with the Great Bow, but we're not quite able to hit that arrow, but we will be using that a little bit later to some effect. And here we just try to go for a little bit of a literal turn and burn, and we see the incantation that takes up basically a football field area, so we just kind of run away, and this is kind of a nice way to do like Ring Around the Rosie, just kind of dropping down that area and then going back up the stairs. It can allow you to isolate some players in some instances, which is really nice. And then here we go ahead and try to get this player slept. Fortunately, they were a little bit too far outside the cloud, so I was hoping to get 1 hit in. Sometimes you can get like weird combos with sleep where you get them stunned by a hit before the sleep effect takes effect, and then it kind of resets their ability to get stunned and roll. So sometimes you can get 3 hits in where you might only normally get 2 because that first hit happens before the sleep animation. So something to think about there if you can time it right. I mean, obviously it depends on their armor, it depends on a whole bunch of factors, but sometimes it is possible. Now, we do see the Putrescence incantation coming out, which does a ton of damage and can be very hard to avoid. So we're going to back off a little bit and try to play a little tactically here and just wait for them to come down the stairs and see if we can knock them off the ledge. And we hit both of them in that moment, but we only managed to knock one of them off the ledge. And then based on the fan daggers, we can see that they are not too pleased with the use of the Great Bow. So we go ahead and try to take advantage of their aggression here. They actually get the buff on the Euphoria, so that's pretty scary. That does a lot of damage in this patch. Fortunately, it's not like fully buffed, but yeah, we really need to be ready to go for some strafes if they're gonna hit that L2 button, because that does a lot of damage. And we're gonna see what we can do, see if we can keep them at low health. And so we're actually gonna switch over to the hand-to-hand moveset, just because that's a good way for chase downs, and we have the option to potentially poise break them on just a neutral heavy attack, which I believe the first hit only does around 80 poise damage. So if they have under 80 poise, our neutral heavy attack will actually poise break on the first hit. So that's really nice. We can see here that the Palm Blast is not really working out in our favor. I was just kind of experimenting with the timing of that. I liked Palm Blast a lot more when nobody knew what it did and people would just mash into it, but again, not the case anymore. So we, I don't know, I think Whirlwind Kick is probably the way to go, but I was, just seeing the utility, and I think Palm Blast is actually kind of fun in certain scenarios where you can potentially get gravity kills with it and stuff like that. So a good time there. And here we do manage to switch back to the KGS, get a backstab on the host after finishing off the Phantom, and now they're just going for their L2, so it's not super challenging. We see if we can set up for a backstab. Doesn't quite work out. We're wondering if we can trade with Palm Blast, but they're just kind of not taking the bait. So we go ahead and go for some jumping kicks and finish them off. Now, this next one was kind of funny. They had a difficult time with PvE, I would say. The skeleton in the area is, you know, taking up a lot of space, and then there's also a death bird nearby, which does so much damage. So we need to look out for the big Ashes of Wars, especially with the Greatsword of Ruin, or Ruin's Greatsword, whatever it is. And we also need to look out for the player that really likes Vike's War Spear. Now, fortunately, we're getting some alone time with this player with low poise, and we can just kind of bully them with the hand-to-hand arts after landing some KGS hits. And yeah, whenever I see somebody with low poise, it makes me want to use hand-to-hand as much as possible. Dane's footwork is a lot of fun, and like really, if you felt that it was lackluster in earlier patches, I think it's in a pretty good spot right now with the poise damage, with the overall damage, and like I'm not even buffing for it, you know, very very effectively. Like the Shattered Stone Talisman also buffs just like the damage of the heavy attacks, and you can also just get so many multi-hits with it, even if they're just phantom hits. So something like Millicent's Prosthesis or the Rottenwing Sword Insignia is going to be a great addition to just the Dane's footwork or the other hand-to-hand arts moveset. So yeah, I strongly recommend you use it again. I feel like I've made a couple videos on it, so I'm probably not going to do its own showcase. And I feel like just looking at other people who have done videos on it, like YouTube doesn't seem to enjoy hand-to-hand art content, which is interesting to me because I feel like it's one of the most fun movesets. But I don't know, like maybe just people are not super enthralled by fist weapons, and that kind of makes sense. They are kind of one-dimensional in their playstyle. Like it's super aggro, which is a lot of fun to play, but it might not be the most fun to watch. So moving on, we have a nice 3v1 here in Lanedale, and we have some help from the PvE. Now we do see a medium shield, so we're not going to be spamming our follow-up attacks, and we get rewarded for that by not getting parried. And then we do get a nice guard break here off a jumping attack, and we don't want to get parried again. So we're just going to be doing the first part of Flaming Strike over and over again as they roll into us, which is definitely not the play on their part. And next we're going to practically get dizzy from the number of rolls we see coming out from the host. So we didn't have a great connection with them, which made them nearly impossible to hit. You can't really roll catch a player that has like 300 plus ping, so just have a hard time here. But eventually they will stop rolling, and once they stop rolling, they start going for some attacks. They can take some trades with our hand-to-hand arts, and we just manage to kind of out DPS them as they try to hit us with Moonveil. So a nice kind of 3v1 there. The host was really not the biggest challenge, but kind of a fun invasion nonetheless. Now, next up we have, this one I actually really enjoyed because it functioned kind of as 3 1v1s in sequence. So we have this player with the Guts Ultra Greatsword, and we'll need to just kind of be wary of their poise. They're going to be getting a lot of hyper armor, and they can interrupt anything we're doing with their own hit. So going for jumping heavies will be, I think, the only attack that we have besides our Piercing Fang Ash of War that will interrupt their attack. So we really just need to play carefully, you know, look for roll catches and moments when they're not in hyper armor, and make sure we don't take any trades. So that's kind of the mindset we have going in playing against this player. And I would say that it's usually better to just, you know, also run a Colossal Sword, which I did have available, and I actually don't know if I used it in any of these invasions, but having the hard swap over to a Gugs with Waves of Darkness was the reason I had so much endurance, and just an option that I definitely used in invasions for this build, but I just think some of those invasions didn't make it into the showcase. So, you know, something to think about there. Swapping over to a Colossal Sword when you see a Colossal Sword, I think, is a great idea, but I also just wanted to showcase the fun of the KGS. And, you know, I just find this and like this, the Claymore and Colossal Swords, they really just have a soft spot in my heart, because I ran so much just strength builds when I first started invading in Souls games, and really just kind of love the Great Swords and Colossal Swords. They're just really fun to play. Having that hyper armor feels pretty good when you have multiple opponents, and you can just, I don't know, shut a lot of things down with them and get some combos. But that's going to cover the invasion portion of the showcase. We'll move on to the duels, and this first duel is actually going to be a one-on-one for somebody that's just doing bonfire dueling. And I believe this is somebody that watches the channel, so I wanted to include them. This was a great fight. It was a fun, just kind of like KGS mirror match. And Yeah, here, this was a good moment where I caught them with a semi-charged heavy attack, so I figured that they would roll appropriately for the heavy attack, and so I delayed it just a little bit, and that allowed me to get a combo into a light attack, and that, I think, was a big health deficit that was kind of hard to come back to for them. Just, that's kind of how KGS works. Like, you get kind of some momentum going with it, and you get a couple combos in, and it's very hard to recover. So we were able to get the health advantage early on, and then get a nice roll catch with Piercing Fang. Now, the next ones are going to be in the arena. This is going to be all at level 125, since I do most of my arena gameplay at level 125. And this player is going to be running the recently buffed Colossal weapons, which now have a crouch attack that come out on frame 15. So for reference, the offhand Dane's footwork also comes out on frame 15. So crouching attacks are coming out as fast as, just like an offhand kick, which is crazy. Obviously, you need to be in a crouched state, so that does add some frames and some ability to just kind of predict what's going on, but this player is using BHS, so that gives them access to the crouching attack out of BHS, which is pretty scary. So this was a difficult player. They were very much able to 3-shot me if they got all their hits in, and here I got them to, I believe, like maybe literally 1 HP, so I just pulled out my offhand dagger and yeah, threw out some hits because I was not trying to trade into a colossal weapon like that. Next up we have a player that is, I believe, running a Claymore, and so this is kind of the old question, like KGS or Claymore, and I really enjoy both weapons, and I think both are very strong. You can see the heavy attack being super strong for the Claymore, and they get in a lot of damage early on. But then we'll see just kind of where the KGS shines as we finally get in a heavy attack, combo it into 2 more hits, and we're basically even with health. So yeah, the combos, I would say, are a little bit harder to grab with the KGS, but once you get them, it kind of evens right back out. And so we go ahead and delay a heavy attack, trying to get a nice roll catch there. We do need to look out for the jumping attack, and we're also playing a little bit patiently because we know that we have not a lot of HP left in us, and we just, we want to be careful here. So we go ahead and delay a nice Piercing Fang right in their face, and that's something that is very hard to dodge because you're so used to the KGS player just going between heavy attack and light attack, heavy attack and light attack, that when they get right up in your face and then pull out a Piercing Fang, it's just so hard not to roll based on reaction timing of either a heavy attack or a light attack, and then the KGS Piercing Fang is just delayed long enough where it catches you. So Piercing Fang played the right way with like the right reads can just be so deadly. Next up, we do have a player running Power Stance Great Spears, which are definitely not as scary as they used to be. The tracking nerf is really nice, and I would say most of the time they're pretty reactable, especially if you're used to the gameplay. Depends on how well your opponent is just kind of like animation blending. And this person's definitely doing a good job of applying pressure. You can see me roll a couple times there, but we end up rolling in, getting a backstab, going for a weapon buff, and following that up with the Piercing Fang roll catch. So here we can just, I believe the last 3 duels all ended with a Piercing Fang roll catch. It's just so hard not to roll when your HP is low and you see that they're going for like either a light attack or a heavy attack, or what you assume to be a light attack or a heavy attack. You just see that sword move, you delay your roll a little bit, and then get caught by Piercing Fang. It's really takes a lot of discipline to not roll in those moments. And yeah, I mean, especially if a person has saved their Piercing Fang for the end, like they haven't used any Ash of War up until that point, it's really rough, and just like one of the best mind games that you can use with KGS. So here we go ahead and grab that heavy attack into 3-hit combo for yeah, just all the HP that we need on that player. And next up we have somebody running Power Stance Straight Sword. So this is a matchup that I actually rather enjoy, KGS into Power Stance Straight Swords, because so much of the Power Stance Straight Swords gameplay is going to be jumping attacks, especially if they're not just going for whiff punishes, and so many of the KGS attacks come as overhead swings. So the running light attack, the crouching attack, and the neutral attack can all anti-air Power Stance Straight Sword player. So really, yeah, like having a little bit of hyper armor and the ability to anti-air a player that's going for a lot of jumping attacks can be really nice. So here we go for a couple whiff swings as bait, and then continue swinging, trying to catch them as they run in for a whiff punish. So that's also another benefit of playing Power Stance Straight Sword. So here they do a good job of rolling the Piercing Fang. I think had I gotten a little bit closer, perhaps I could have baited a better roll timing, but it's also dangerous to get close to power stance straight swords because of just like the raw damage. It just comes out so fast. Today's poise values are pretty standard for the greatsword. The KGS will consistently poise break for all attacks aside from the one-handed follow-up light attack chain, which is very common for most great type weapons. On the right, I wanted to include our offhand poise damage, so Dane's footwork has poise values broken down by the first and second swing on the two-handed moveset. Most attacks will poise break on the second hit, but it's worth noting that typically the first swing does have a lower poise damage. The running and jumping heavies will be some of the strongest options due to their guaranteed poise breaks on their first swings. The neutral heavy is decent, but note that the first swing only does a bit over 79 poise damage, which typically won't be a guaranteed poise break. Next, let's take a look at the frame data. I think the KGS could have had an entire video dedicated to frame data, so instead, we'll just look at the speed buffs that came with the heavy attack and how you might get the R2 true combo. Patch 1.14 moved the release window up by 3 frames, so the uncharged heavy can now come out on frame 18. It's worth noting that this also moved up the hyper armor by 3 frames to frame 5, which is phenomenal. Looking at the follow-up light attack, we can see that this comes out on frame 46. If your opponent is hit by the last frame of the heavy attack, they won't be able to roll until frame 46, which means you'll hit your combo. Since this is frame dependent, you won't be landing this combo very often. If you do frame the heavy attack though, that will definitely help you land it on the last frame rather than the first frame. That said, not everyone will roll directly out of stun, so it's possible you'll get the combo anyway. Additionally, this puts your opponent in a situation where they need to roll out of stun to avoid the light attack, which means you can roll catch with Piercing Fang very consistently, and the combos, the mix-up, and the mind games that come with KGS really just makes it one of the strongest greatswords in the game, and just so much fun. Dane's footwork also saw a speed increase for heavy attacks, where the release window was moved up from frame 8 to frame 3. This is pretty massive for a speed increase and really kind of makes the heavy attack feel viable again. We're mostly going to be sticking to the heavy attacks on the two-handed moveset, so we'll see that the running heavy is a bit slow coming out on frame 17 and 26, but both of these attacks do poise break. The jumping heavy is a bit faster coming out on frame 12, however the first hit will frequently miss unless the input is entered kind of late in the jump so that your first hit doesn't go over your opponent's head. Lastly, we'll note that the one-handed light attack comes out on frame 15, which is comparatively slow for an offhand weapon. For example, the offhand hand axe comes out on frame 13, which is why it's typically chosen for true combos with halberds and other weapons like that. That just about wraps up everything I wanted to say about poise and frame data. There's always lots more to explore, so feel free to click the links in the description for more details. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I hope you have a great day.